Thank you, Dina. Dina and I'm Maria. We are both part of organizations that are members of ICHRP, or the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. I'm in Sowing Solidarity organization, which is an environmental justice Philippine Solidarity org, and Dina is a member of Clackamas UCC, which is a member organization of ICHRP. So ICHRP is the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, and it's a global alliance of churches, grassroots organizations, trade unions, made up of people who are concerned about the human rights situation in the Philippines and are committed to taking action in solidarity with the Filipino people. And I wanted to start off today by thanking this congregation for all the work that you've done so far in support of ICHRP and Philippine Solidarity, from signing petitions to planning fundraisers to having us come and speak today. All of these contributions are doing so much to advance the fight of the Filipino people for a just and lasting peace in their country. And actually, as Clay was mentioning, Pastor Giuseppe is at a conference this weekend or this week in Kansas City, and one of the things he's doing there is helping to hopefully pass a resolution in the UCC nationally that would open up new avenues for Philippine solidarity work on a national level within the church. So really thankful for that work that everyone here is doing. It's cool to see it expanding different parts of the country, just building Philippine solidarity on so many different fronts. And something that, as I've gotten to know this church in the last couple months, is I've seen how much of a passion for migrant justice you all have, and how it has been really growing as these attacks on migrants have been escalating. And something within the ICHRP framework that we really look at is both the conditions on the ground, the conditions of what people are facing locally, but then also zooming out and looking to see what are the structures and systems that are making it so that people have to leave their homeland, so that people are in poverty. So in the case of the Philippines, it's really the Philippine government's prioritization of its own wealth and its relationship with the U.S. that is, it's given precedent over the needs of the people. And so the people are living in poverty while the leaders are living lavishly. The President Marcos is going to be here in DC next week while his people are suffering. He's going around the world making new deals, new economic deals, military deals. And so for a bit of context on the history of the Philippines, it was bought by the U.S. from Spain in the late 1800s and was granted independence in 1947. But because of the way the different military agreements and trade agreements function, the Philippines really functions as a semi-colony of the U.S., and it's a semi-feudal country, so the vast majority of people are peasants who live off the land, but it's land that they don't own. It's owned by landlords, and so often they're in these really exploitative, unequal relationships where they owe massive amounts of debt that they'll never be able to pay off, so they're just stuck working this land, unable to really provide for themselves and their families. And so this is one of the big reasons that people come to the U.S. or are forced to leave and go different places, is because of these conditions. And so it's in this context that the Pagtatanim Interfaith Conference was convened in Rome. Pagtatanim is a Tagalog word that means sowing or planting seeds. So we're going to be talking today about sowing seeds of solidarity. That was the theme of the conference. And it was really special because it was in Rome, and it's a Jubilee year. And so there were so many people coming in honor of that. And one of the bishops, when we were at the conference, said, "We're here because we dare to dream Jubilee, the sacred call to return balance." And so that's really what it's all about, is equity and equality and justice. And so we had people from all over the world coming together in Rome to talk about Philippine solidarity. We had so many people from the Philippines sharing their stories, some people who have been forced to leave the Philippines who came and shared what that experience was like. And this conference took inspiration from an interfaith conference that happened back in the 80s when Marcos Sr., who's the infamous father of the current Philippine president, had declared martial law. And faith leaders came together to say, in the midst of this heightening fascism, how do we respond? What do we do as people of faith? And so that is why we came together. What do we do as people of faith, as people in faith communities? How do we respond to this moment? And so over the days of the conference, we heard different stories. We passed resolutions about how we want to act moving forward. And then on the last day, we got to do a mass in a Catholic Filipino church there, and then do a prophetic witness action in a park near there, which was like part rally, part liturgy. So it was really cool. It was amazing meeting so many people from around the world who are doing similar work. And I wanted to just bring back a couple of lessons that we learned and things that we talked about throughout the conference. One of them is the need for a just and lasting peace in the Philippines, the importance of the preferential option for the poor, and the power of witness and accompaniment. And on the need for just peace in the Philippines, the Filipino organizers there shared with us about the conditions that they call unpeace in the Philippines. So the Philippine nation is not technically at war with anyone, but there is a high degree of militarization. There is a high degree of violence, and there is what's sometimes called undeclared or de facto martial law in the countryside. And so really the U.S. Often treats the Philippines as a military base itself, and it's the people on the ground who are really experiencing fear from, if there's military helicopters overhead, there's indiscriminate bombings. And so there is unpeace in the Philippines. But the thing that's important for us to know is that we have to fight for a peace that's truly just and lasting, because for the Philippine government, peace means people are just quiet. They're not in the streets fighting. They're not in the countryside taking up arms. They are just, everything is quiet. That's what they're trying to do, is repress the people's movements. And so for the leading class, that's what they're after. But we know that if everyone is silent, that doesn't mean that there's peace. People are still in turmoil from the poverty, from the joblessness, from the lack of land. And so we know that the peace that we're looking for is peace that isn't based on silencing the oppressed or the oppressed no longer fighting back, but it's peace that's based on real structural change. And the second thing I wanted to share with you is what we learned about the preferential option for the poor, which we heard a little bit about in Pope Francis's testimony. One part of this is acknowledging how we are all in some way struggling under the current structure. So it's a global system that we're struggling under. And so a lot of us are, facing budget cuts, cuts to SNAP, Medicaid, people are facing homelessness. And so that's one thing to hold. And then the other part of it is that we know that our faith and our traditions call us to look to the margins, to where people are suffering in even more severe ways. We experience these things within a country that has more wealth and more resources, but for people who live in a country like the Philippines that is globally on the margins, we have to look at how these economic crises affect them in particular ways. And so we turn and we look at the rural communities in the Philippines that are under that de facto martial law, and where people are tied to these exploitative landlord peasant relationships. And one of the people who spoke at the conference is from the Rural Missionaries of the Philippines, and she was telling us how their bank accounts have been frozen because they were accused of financing terrorism, when in reality the money that they have is going to provide services for people who the government is not providing services for. Another person we heard from is Sister Pat, she's a nun from Australia who moved to the Philippines to do missionary work and ended up getting deported for her activism and solidarity. And something that stuck out to me from what she shared was that when she first went to the Philippines, she was asked to go to Manila and work among the people there. And her response was that she wanted to follow Christ to the margins and go to the rural areas where the people are suffering the most intensely, but not only suffering, but banding together to fight back against the unjust conditions. And that's the other thing that we see when we look at the margins, is that we see resistance always. And so we see that locally with migrants self-organizing to defend each other. We've seen, even just this last week, a migrant in detention that we've been working with who was released. And so it's through these fights and this resistance that we're seeing victories against this system. And in the Philippines, it can be people waging campaigns to get higher wages. It can be blocking the entrance to different mining projects. And it can be people taking up arms in the countryside to defend their land and their people. We see locally the caregivers who have been exploited invisibly for so long, who are now rising up and leading campaigns to get just wages, to have their employers acknowledge that the way they've been treated is not right. And so we're seeing so much resistance, and it's very inspiring. And that brings us to the last part of it, which is combining the witnessing and the seeing with authentic accompaniment. I love the way that this Pope Francis quote is worded, where he says, "Only on the basis of this real and sincere closeness can we properly accompany the poor on their path of liberation." And I really like the way that's worded, because I think in our solidarity work, we always have to be reminded that it's not us who are liberating people or saving anyone, but it's the people themselves, particularly in our case, the Filipino people, who are liberating themselves. And as solidarity allies, we're listening, we're supporting, we're taking up campaigns in support because we know that liberation for one group of people or one country is a big step in liberation for all of us. And so this concept of accompaniment, it can look a lot of different ways. It can be witnessing each other in community. This church has such a strong community, so that's part of accompaniment in my mind, is just being there with each other. But it's also going out into the community, accompanying people who are struggling, which this church also does an amazing job of going out and saying, what are people's lives like? What are the problems we're facing, and how can we work together to address those? It can look like physically accompanying someone to their immigration hearings, or physically witnessing through being a legal observer. It can look like going to the Philippines to accompany human rights defenders and church workers as they go about their lives. One person I wanted to share about that really accompanies this commitment to just peace, this preferential option for the poor, and witness and accompaniment, is a man named Louis Halandoni. He grew up in a wealthier family in the Philippines, but he started spending time with workers on a sugarcane plantation, and that's where he realized that there's these systemic inequities and that he could play a part in dismantling those. And so he first became a priest and served the people in that way, and then he never left the faith, but he did leave the priesthood, and he actually became a revolutionary leader in the Philippines. And someone at the conference described him as being someone who was not only an ally to the poor, but he became one with them. He went away from his family and the wealth that they had and served the poor. And so he's very inspiring, and he actually just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And I've just been thinking a lot about how do we honor him and continue his legacy, and how do we cast off some of our comforts and become one with people who are suffering the most, whether it's spending our time differently or spending our money differently, or spending our mental energy to brainstorm how we can contribute to these struggles. In that spirit, the last thing I wanted to share is just some specific calls to action that ICHRP Portland wanted to invite this congregation to partake in. So one thing is ICHRP as an alliance is open to everyone. So if this congregation wants to join ICHRP and really continue to grow the solidarity work, and there's going to be a faith working group across Portland in ICHRP, so that's something we're really excited about and hoping to get more and more people of faith on board with. We also have the yard sale coming up, with which Barb has done so much to head that up. So that's going to be August 1st and 2nd, 9 to 3. So if anyone has donations they would like to make, please bring those to us. And we also, I didn't pass them around yet, but there are some little half sheets that we can share, and it has a little more info. We're still fundraising for the costs of the trip, so it has our Venmo name, and then you can also connect with me or Dina if you want to donate to the conference. The third thing is there's going to be an International Migrants Alliance conference being hosted here in Portland. So as a host city, there's like particular tasks to take up. So it would be wonderful if folks who are interested in that will either come, or you can get plugged into volunteering, especially if you know other languages and want to be involved in interpretation or childcare. So that's something that would be wonderful to have all of you engage with. And then the fourth thing is ICHRP is having a special General Assembly in September, so a little over a month from now, 2 months. September 19th through 21st, that'll be in San Francisco. So if anyone is down for a road trip and an opportunity to meet with a lot of other ICHRP folks, then let's talk more about that. One thing I forgot to mention with the International Migrants Alliance Conference is that on September 1st, there will be a mobilization up to the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma. And so even if you can't come to the whole conference, it'd be great if we can get a contingent from Park Rose to go up there. I know Rita and Diana and I all went up there a couple weeks ago, and it was really powerful. And then the last thing, just to put it on your radar, there's nothing confirmed yet, but in talking about accompaniment, there will be some opportunities next year for faith delegations to go to the Philippines on integrations, primarily with churches, missionaries, and communities of faith. And so just putting that on your radar, think about it, and I'll share more info when I have that. Thank you so much for listening and being such a warm, welcoming community for us. Thank you.